Hey, what's up everyone? James here, and I am back with Transformers Last Bot Standing. It's crazy that after this video, we're already halfway through the story. But before we get started, I do need to mention this. There is a lot, I'm telling you, a lot to unpack in this issue. So I may miss a few things, and if I do, comment down below what I missed. Now with that out of the way, let's get right into it. So this second issue opens with a flashback of Rodimus on his knees looking distraught as his starship that brought him to Donnokt burns to ashes. From there we go to present day with Rodimus at the crash site of the pod that brought the bot he killed in the last issue to Donnokt. And as he is inspecting the pod, he's talking to himself trying to figure out how the pod got here. However, Rodimus is having a hard time finding the words to speak, and we'll find out why that's the case in a bit. But even with this disadvantage, he's able to figure out a few details about the pod. The first is since the pod doesn't have any flight capabilities that he can see, then it had to be fired out of something. Second, most of the electronics in the pod are out except for this one red light. And finally, inside the pod there's this bioorganic fluid all over the pod that Rodimus finds disgusting but deduces it's not Cybertronian at all. As he is trying to make sense of all this, Rodimus isn't alone. Shib is here trying to help but is really interrupting him. Shib asks Rodimus how he got here, and Rodimus ignores her question and asks Shib if the people let her follow him even after what he did to the other bot. And Shib replies no and sarcastically says she borrowed the horse in order to follow him. And again, I know this is not a horse, but even in the second issue we still don't get told what the species is. Shib tells Rodimus she wanted to meet him because he has been in her family since before she was born, and that's why even the people of Fembrance think they're in cahoots together. Her father warned her that if she ever met Rodimus though, it was because something bad was happening, and Shib asks Rodimus what is happening. However, Rodimus admits that he doesn't know. He can't even remember words because his neural processor had to start overriding itself from having no fuel and from being on standby mode for a long time. He's not even sure how long he's been in standby mode. Suddenly Rodimus notices the stars, and he thinks the stars will tell him how much time has passed, but the sight leaves him even more confused. The stars in the sky aren't where they're supposed to be. He noticed that a lot of them have disappeared since he last looked at them, and even as he looks at them, another one disappears. And Rodimus asks Shib how long have the stars been disappearing, and Shib explains that the stars have been disappearing since her grandfather's time, and she's been watching them disappear her whole life. Her family calls them the Lost Lights. Now, Lost Lights is a callback to the comic series of the same name, but also is the name of the starship Rodimus used in that series to go on a quest to find the Knights of Cybertron. When Shib asks Rodimus what has been causing the stars to die, Rodimus informs her it's because of beings like him. Rodimus goes into this awesome monologue here, and I love the artwork displayed. He tells Shib that he thought the Great War between the Autobots and Decepticons was over. He says, "I thought I could finally rest because it was over and finished. I prayed it was. Some of my people could remember life before the war, but I was forged into it. It never felt normal or natural to me. We convinced ourselves it was, that this is who we were and what we did. We could fight it or each other. It's still fighting and dying. Dying came easy to us. You were never mourned long enough because you could always be brought back. We weren't the same as other species in the galaxy. You can rebuild a Cybertronian, but you can't resurrect a star or remake a planet until we finally did it. There were no more places left to battle over and to drain resources. No one to bring us back. We could just end, just like all those planets and people. I was the last of my kind, and thank Primus for that, because we took away the stars, planets, and so many people. We needed to stop and put an end to it. That's how I ended up with you." Rodimus asks Shib what she knows about him, and Shib informs him that she can only say what Rodimus told her family, that if we kept you safe, you would keep us safe, my whole family in the world. And Rodimus is surprised he said that because it is a lot of responsibility, and says that that doesn't sound like something he would sign up for. Shib tells Rodimus that her father told her this, that you kept us safe before in the past, and if we needed you again, you take care of all of us. So there's a lot to talk about here. I think the flashback of Rodimus's ship burning may possibly have to do with him protecting Shibs' family in the past. Also, everything Rodimus said about his race is the truth. Autobots and Decepticons fought for millions of years until Cybertron, their own home planet, was rendered lifeless. And then this war spread to other planets and involved other sentient species, and even death could not stop this conflict that has caused, as we can see, irreversible damage to the galaxy. Maybe Rodimus is right after all. There might be some merit in his race ending. I would like to hear what you guys think about all this. Rodimus and Shib then take notice of a group of people approaching, and Shib tells Rodimus that it's the sheriff of Fembrands arriving with some of the townfolk. And Rodimus mentions that the one thing he does remember is a difference between a mob and townfolk. The flaming torches are what give it away. So Rodimus's exchange with the sheriff is hilarious. Old man Rodimus is a smartass, and I love him for it. Sheriff Errold announces that he is going to bring Rodimus back to town and detain him until he's able to determine his reasons for being here. And Rodimus is like, but you let me go. I just walked out of your town, so... And Sheriff Errold claims that he was startled and surprised and he was unable to detain him because of those reasons. And Rodimus says, unable to, more like untried to. You stood there and just watched me peel the other guy and walk away. Like, come on. Even one of the townfolk chimes in saying, don't let him talk to you that way, Errold. And I was cracking up when I read this. The sheriff tells Rodimus he thought his kind were just myths, stories that people tell their children that are designed to scare them. And Shib tries to defend Rodimus, saying he isn't dangerous. However, the sheriff makes a good point here, saying the bot he killed didn't cause any harm to anyone. Rodimus was the one who threw the first punch and kept attacking him until he tore his head off. And Rodimus agrees with the sheriff. He even tells Shib that he is dangerous and she needs to remember that, and so does he, because if he doesn't, that'll make him even more of a threat. The sheriff then goes after Shib, saying that she isn't free of suspicion since she has been harboring Rodimus and followed him out of town after everything that happened. He even mentions that her family was known to always skew toward the unusual, but didn't think it'd be dangerous. Rodimus tries to defend Shib, telling the sheriff she didn't know anything, but the sheriff doesn't believe him. And what he says next is too good. He says, you saw what I can do, right? I can pull some sweet moves and bam, flatten all of you and look awesome while doing it. When the sheriff replies that that's doing little to change their assumptions about their connection, Rodimus offers to come along with them back to town. He says, I'll let you tie me down even though I could break free any second, and I'll talk. Unless Shib is threatened in any way, then it's showtime. The sheriff reluctantly agrees, but tells Shib that her and her family will be under strict guard at their home. The sheriff asks Rodimus to go back to his wagon form because he would feel a lot safer if his fists were put away. Rodimus refuses because he doesn't want to waste energy switching modes and says, I feel safer with my fists where they are. Elsewhere in the desert, we go to Moon observing Donnokt, and through his inner monologue, we learn this newer generation of Cybertronians are currently at the edge of extinction, desperately moving from planet to planet, seeking resources just enough to stay alive. And Moon seems to really hold resentment towards his ancestors, the Autobots and Decepticons of the past, for causing them to live in this never-ending cycle in order to survive. Now, the commander of these bots that I know a couple of you guys are excited to see is Steeljaw, calling Moon Officer Spineshucker, which apparently that's what he was formerly known as, but changed it at some point to Moon. Steeljaw doesn't seem to like Moon all that much, saying he's embarrassed by Moon's appearance, and even when Moon tries to thank Steeljaw for the job of overseeing the landing operations, Steeljaw tells Moon that he wasn't chosen, lots were drawn, and thankfully he hasn't disgraced himself yet. Steeljaw asks Moon for a status report on the equipment and crew, and Moon reports that all equipment is intact, supplies are undamaged, and all stasis units holding the last of the Cybertronians show strong life signs. Steeljaw's sister Sharpclaw approaches, informing her brother they've located Nitro's signal, who seems to be the bot Rodimus killed in the last issue. Steeljaw tells his sister to form a recovery party. Moon asks to be a part of the recovery party, but Steeljaw quickly shoots down that idea. His sister Sharpclaw mentions that Moon's form doesn't have travel capabilities, and Steeljaw says that he deduces it would take 2 hours for Moon to reach Nitro's location, even with him hopping really fast in his preposterous form. Moon defends his form by saying it's a statement, and whatever that statement is, we don't learn in this issue. Sharpclaw ends up choosing Override and Riot Gear to be a part of the recovery party. And Sharpclaw mentions to her brother that a Cybertronian life sign is moving away from Nitro's crash site as they speak. And Steeljaw just assumes that it's Nitro, probably confused and lost, that it's easy for that to happen when you're low on fumes. Later, we go to Nitro's crash pod, where Sheriff Errold posted guards. The guards are confused by the steam ramblers approaching, but quickly realize these vehicles are moving a lot faster than steam ramblers, and end up transforming into Override and Riot Gear. The funny thing that happens here is Riot Gear gets stuck mid-transformation and requires a kick from Override to complete his shift into his bot mode. As Override searches Nitro's pod, Riot Gear asks if there are any clues, and Override lies as he scoops up the leftover bioorganic fluid in the pod. And just as he's about to consume it, Riot Gear catches him, and they get into an argument. However, the argument gets cut short when Riot Gear sniffs out and finds the two Rangers hiding behind this rock, cowering in fear. He scoops up the two guards, saying, "I like them this way." So by now, you guys probably figured out what this means, just like I did when I read this. The bioorganic fuel that the last surviving Cybertronians are consuming is made up of people. This is crazy. Before Riot Gear eats these Rangers, he asks them if they've seen another one like him, and the Ranger points toward Fembrands. Later at the Walker's home, the posted guard has fallen asleep, and Shib takes notice of this. She puts on her Energon necklace that was in her family heirloom box, but she ends up dropping it, and it ends up waking up her younger brother Beats. And we see that Beats is still processing everything that's happened when he talks to his sister. Rodimus this whole time being their family wagon, Shib chasing after him even after he killed a bot in front of them, and the sheriff keeping their home under guard. Shib tries to put him at ease though, saying she knows a lot has happened. The one thing for sure we can take away from this conversation is their father only told Shib about Rodimus possibly appearing one day. Shib sneaks out of a nearby window and heads down the road into Fembrands. Later that morning, Shib sneaks into town and sees Rodimus tied down, guarded by a few Rangers here. And Rodimus is telling them to remember that he's only there tied down because he wants to be. All of a sudden, the Rangers feel the ground shake beneath them and see these vehicles heading towards them. After the vehicles transform into Riot Gear and Override, the Rangers realize they're in trouble and start firing their weapons at Override and Riot Gear as they follow the Cybertronian signal. To no surprise, the Rangers' weapons aren't even laying a scratch on Riot Gear and Override. They're completely ignoring the Rangers. Shib sneaks up to Rodimus and informs him that more of his kind have appeared in town. Override spots Rodimus as Rodimus tells Shib to do nothing, revealing to her that he's out of Energon, which means he can't keep her safe. Shib tries to offer her Energon vial necklace to Rodimus, but before she can, Rodimus tells her to get to safety and hide. Now, what I didn't expect was Riot Gear and Override to be so overjoyed at discovering Rodimus. They can't believe they found another Cybertronian. Riot Gear even says that Rodimus is a miracle, and they even call him brother. And as they're releasing him from his binds, Override tells Riot Gear they need to get Rodimus back to camp. But Riot Gear asks, what about Nitro? And Override replies, wherever Nitro is, he's in better shape than Rodimus. Rodimus asks them where they came from and how are they not dead, and even tells Override to not touch him. But it seems like Override and Riot Gear are just ignoring him, seeing Rodimus as a confused, helpless old man in need of help. As they leave, Override says that this is an omen that they finally found a home. Sometime later, the three guards report to Sheriff Errold that Rodimus was stolen from them by more of his kind, and they seemed happy to see him, and did mention something about resources. One thing I thought was funny here is when the sheriff says, and none of you were hurt in the process, suggesting that they didn't put much of a fight. One of the Rangers replies, I got a big splitter in my shooting hand, and I just laughed at that. It was too funny. The sheriff initially suggests they head up to the Walker's home for some answers. Suddenly, a guard bursts through the door with news that Shib's gone missing. Sheriff Errold becomes furious when he hears this news. He assumes that Shib is working with the mechanical interlopers, as he puts it, with the end goal being to steal the resources in the hills, and says he will not let that come to pass. From there, we go back to the Cybertronians' crash site, where we see more bots have been taken out of stasis, and see that they're turning their crash site into a distillery. Moon informs Steeljaw that they have an ample amount of fuel for the first round of fuel processing. Steeljaw tells Moon to revive revive 2 more of their Cybertronian brethren, and Moon informs Steeljaw that they would leave this bot known as the Veteran the last to be awaiting revival, and mentions out of everyone that they require the least amount of fuel consumption. However, Steeljaw replies, also the least useful and annoying. The Veteran stays offline for now. Override and Raiki arrive at camp with Rodimus, and Sharpclaw mentions that isn't Nitro. Override informs Steeljaw that they found someone. Rodimus comes to as Override carries him and asks Steeljaw where they come from, and an overjoyed Steeljaw replies, we would ask you the same thing. Steeljaw goes to touch Rodimus, but Rodimus pushes Override off of him, yelling, don't touch me, and then goes into his fighting stance, saying, I thought it was over, wouldn't have rested if I thought any of you were left, time to finish it. Steeljaw and Sharpclaw try to calm him down, but Rodimus ends up collapsing. We then get another brief flashback that reveals the identities of the 2 other bots, with Rodimus in the last issue's flashback was Strongarm and Gripper. So shout out to a unknown person for guessing Strongarm was one of the bots in the flashback. They're debating on what to do next, and Rodimus tells Strongarm to stay with him and Gripper, but Strongarm doesn't believe they're the last of their kind and thinks that there has to be other bots. He suggests that they look and start again because they deserve it. Rodimus tells Strongarm a beginning for their race means an end to another. They've had their time and this planet is beginning to have life. And if there are others of their kind out there, once they discover what this planet is, they need to be ready to defend it. Strongarm agrees and admits that he wouldn't want to be out there anyways without them. Gripper, turning into his alt mode, suggests they go and explore the planet. When Rodimus awakens, Steeljaw introduces himself, tells Rodimus how happy they are to see him, and introduces some of his crew. Rodimus says he thought he was the last one, was supposed to be the last one because he thought he helped destroy them all. And Steeljaw explains that his actions in the past don't matter at this point when there are so few of them left. They are not defined by their past. They are the last Cybertronians and are a family. Now, Rodimus views Steeljaw's words as lies since he sees a Decepticon badge on him, but Steeljaw says we have no use for those labels anymore, brother. Rodimus says to stop calling him that and reveals that they're all that's left because of him. Steeljaw asks Rodimus for his name. Now, Rodimus thinking once he reveals who he is, they'll kill him for his actions. But when he says, my name is Rodimus, Steeljaw and his crew expressions don't change at all. Steeljaw just says, well, pleased to meet you. And Rodimus is confused by this and asks, you've never heard of me. He tries Hot Rod, still nothing. Then tries Rodimus Prime. And still, even mentioning he was a Prime, Steeljaw and his crew still don't know who he is. Sharpclaw whispers to Steeljaw, saying maybe the Veteran knows something. And Steeljaw begrudgingly says, fine, revive the Veteran. Let's see what he knows. Rodimus asks them if they know Optimus Prime, and Override replies that it sorta sounds familiar. I was shocked that even Optimus Prime, these guys don't know who that is. Tries Grimlock, they don't know. But the one bot they seem to all know is Thunderclash. The crew gets excited and says, yeah, everyone knows him. I'm ashamed to admit this, and don't hate me, but I had no idea who Thunderclash was. So I went online and looked him up, and everything I read about him has made me a fan. It's a shame that such a great character has just been strictly used in the comics and not in any of the films or shows. I will say though, I can't wait to meet him in my Transformers Timeline playlist when we get to IDW's More Than Meets the Eye, where he makes his first appearance in that universe. We do get a legitimate reason as to why the Last Cybertronians don't remember Rodimus and the others he mentioned. Steeljaw explains that without fuel or upgrades, over time sacrifices like memories being overwritten had to be done. And Rodimus finds it convenient that they're forgetting about their race's history and says, you won't find Energon here, Decepticon. Go extinct somewhere else. Now, Steeljaw reveals to Rodimus what we already kind of figured out. He says, we have accepted the fact that Energon as we know it is gone, so we had to adapt to other methods of fuel. All you see here, the last remnants of our race, has converted to biofuel. It's a simple conversion process, and he offers to do this for Rodimus while they finish processing their equipment. And that's when Rodimus sees the vats and tubes. Steeljaw tells him that it's part of their rendering plant, and soon they'll begin their breeding and farming program using local resources. And Rodimus realizes then his cape is gone and asks Steeljaw what he did with it. And Steeljaw informs Rodimus they've removed it to make him comfortable and says we were surprised to find a local delicacy in it, which has given us a great opportunity to show the new way we fuel and for you to try your new intake system. We'll use this delicacy as our first batch of food in this, our new home. Rodimus yells Shib as he sees Moon carrying her. Steeljaw tells Riot Gear and Override to get Rodimus fitted for his new system and says, I'll get dinner started. And that is the end of Last Bot Standing Issue 2. If you guys enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. I would greatly appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you are new here. And if you want more Transformers content, check out my playlist covering IDW's Transformerverse, where we're currently going over Autocracy, or check out Transformers Shattered Glass. Other than that, have a fantastic day, and always remember every day to go beyond. See you later, Beyonders.